Hello, it is Chad here from the Teach Better team, and I'm with the amazing Dave Schmidow, and we are here for our Administrator Mastermind Rewind. Dave, we had some amazing meetings yesterday with administrators from across the country. How are you doing this morning?
Across the world, around the world. Yeah, it wasn't just the country, it was the world, man.
So how are you feeling after yesterday's meetings?
Exhausted, exhilarated. I tell everybody it's part of these things that they wreck my sleeping patterns for Tuesday night because my mind is just spinning with all of the amazing thoughts and ideas, emotions, hearts, everything that they bring to the table. And last night was no exception. From 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. yesterday, my mind was just racing. And then from 7 p.m. until right now, my mind has been racing because our two meetings yesterday were phenomenal. And just as a person, individually, selfishly, I feel like I grow so much from these meetings, and I can't shut it down. I cannot stop thinking about it. So I'm glad we get to do this just so I can kind of purge my thoughts a little bit so that I can just move forward because my mind is still spinning.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And we hear more and more that administrators and educational leaders just look forward to these moments where they can, sometimes it's venting, sometimes it's just sharing, sometimes it's just pure solid problem solving, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like this really nice way for them to realize, A, they're not alone, right? B, there are other people that have the same problems they do, and that they have a network and a group that they can go to help them. So I love the tight-knit family that we're building and that's continually growing. I think you said we had a ton of new people. I know we had a couple new ones in the morning meeting. We had a ton of new people in the one in the Admin Mastermind in the afternoon. So just it's growing. It's been an amazing resource for those who have been a part of it, and it's going to continue to be an amazing resource. What are some of the, we can start with the morning or the afternoon, doesn't really matter, but what were some of the main topics that you think are on administrators' minds right now? What were some of the topics that kind of stuck out to you as the most prevalent?
Yeah, well, first let me start off with a text that I got last night after our session, and then I'll circle back around to the morning session if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So a few years ago, I posted a picture. When I was a school principal, somebody had bought me a present, and it was a Wilson volleyball from like the movie Castaway with the hand on it and the smiley face and all that. And they said, sometimes as an administrator, you feel like you're on an island, put this in your office so you realize you're never alone. Last night, somebody sent me a text and said, the Mastermind group feels like my life raft on my desert island because I feel like so often I'm alone and the waves are surrounding me and I don't know how to get off. And this group allows me to just sit there and realize that there are other people out there fighting the fight with me. And I was like, oh, that is so good. So powerful. That's awesome. It was amazing. And, yesterday morning, we had a couple of new people that joined us, and one of our new people threw out a question that kind of resonated with that. The question was kind of framed around multiple contexts, but it was, in essence, sometimes as a school leader, people come to us and say, I know you don't have the answer for this, but... And then they go and they unload a problem or struggle they're having. And we spent a lot of time yesterday morning kind of breaking that question down and trying to figure out the why behind the question, the purpose behind it, how to respond to that. When you do feel stuck, you feel sometimes as a school leader that you're stuck between the people above, the people below, the people that you support, the people you lean on. People come to you for answers and you don't have the answers. And sometimes you just start spinning. But yet people come to you and they're going to continue to come to you looking for that support. So what do you do with that? And the conversations that just came from that were powerful. And I felt like at times that question for you was almost like somebody put the ball up on the tee and said, Chad, talk to me, man. And you were able to just go with it. It was so good. My notebook was filled up.
That's a super common feeling in a question, right? So teachers get overwhelmed because there's so much going on. And you and I see this working with educators on a daily basis with the Teach Better team, but administrators see it in the trenches as well. Their teachers are coming to them and they're going, I don't have access to whatever the new software is. I haven't gotten my new device, or Johnny can't log in yet because he didn't turn in the permission slip or the form, or like whatever millions of things are preventing them from doing the job that they see themselves being able to do in a perfect scenario. So real quick, I want to say hey to Jeff. I want to say hey to Jen. I want to say hey to Adam Katos, who stopped in as well. If you're watching live, put hashtag live. If you're watching this later, put hashtag replay. That way we know kind of when you're checking this out. I want to say hey to the Principal Leadership Lab as well. They're checking this out, which is awesome. Good morning. But people kind of come to you as a leader and they go, nothing's working, and I know you can't do anything, but like, and teachers kind of go into two different directions. They go into solution mode where they kind of strategically try to take the next step, or they go into shutdown mode. Right. And as a leader, as a coach, as a trainer, for me, my number one goal is to keep them out of shutdown mode and get them into strategic solution mode. So one of the simplest questions that we talked about asking a staff member when they come to you is, what's one problem you have control of that we can work on right now? Right? Like what is one thing we can plan for or overcome or solve right now? Mr. Prickett's also stopping by. Good to see you, Mr. Prickett. But it's really about shifting their mentality from, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff, to what is one thing I can work on to move the needle, right? And I think that's such a huge part is they're looking at the whole forest, and we need to do that sometimes. But if the whole forest is on fire, you just got to put the part of the fire out that's in front of you. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that like you ignore the rest of the fire. I'm saying is like, if you have enough water to put out the fire in front of you, do that and then move on to the next one, right? And that might not be a good analogy for right now. I just thought about that, but I don't even know if that's accurate, and if firefighters want to chime in, let me know. But assuming that that's best practice, however, like really get them focused on what are small strategic steps we can take. What is a small solution? Can we plan for 5 minutes and move some of those rocks for you? And I think it's really about getting them to the planning stage, getting them to the strategic planning stage after, and I think you brought this up, getting them out of the freak out mode into the planning mode, but knowing that you heard them.
Yes.
And making them know that you heard what they had to say. And you mentioned that, and I think that's also really important in this process, right?
Yeah. There's, again, I mean, this was a conversation yesterday that we went 1,000 different directions with, because it sounds like a simple question. Somebody comes to you and says, I can't move forward because this is happening to me. And there are a lot of us that our first inclination would just be to go out and just find the solution, give them the money, find the resource that they're struggling with, and just solve the problem. But that's not necessarily the solution to the problem. The problem is actually oftentimes deeper than that. Now, I'll use your fire analogy in a weird way, if you will. It's almost like, so I'm sitting here right now and I can see out my backyard. And if I had a small little brush fire in my backyard, and I told my 14-year-old, go out there and put out that fire. The hose is right next to the fire. Just go out and do it. And he picks up the hose and says, Dad, the hose won't work. I can't put out the fire. And I say, and because it's crimped, the hose won't work. But right next to him is a bucket filled with water. And he's looking at saying, I can't put out the fire because the hose is crimped. You know, he's looking at saying, the tool I have isn't going to solve the problem, Dad. So he sets down the hose, walks away, and comes to me and says, Dad, I can't put out the fire. The bucket was right next to him. As a dad, I would tell him, look around and see if there's anything else you can use to solve the problem. And it's the same kind of thing with teachers oftentimes. Sometimes they get so focused on the tool not working, they forget about the problem they're trying to solve. Right. And if we can try to reframe that and be that active listener, and instead of saying, yeah, I understand that Google Drive continues to spin, that you can't access all of your files, that you can't access that tool, or Johnny doesn't have his password. Why do you need that? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And is there another workaround that we can brainstorm together? Empowering them to constantly look for new solutions and to continue to innovate and not live within that box that we've oftentimes placed them in is what we need to do as leaders. Listen to them and then empower them at the same time.
I absolutely love that. I think this is a strategy, not only teachers who are watching this, but administrators who are watching this can take a lot away from this, because it's about getting your teachers to focus on the problem and the solution rather than the tool or the resource that's supposed to solve it for them.
Yeah.
And something we talked about even in the group was, a lot of times teachers have this perfect vision of what they want the outcome to be. They want the hose on the fire, and that's what they see in their head, which blinds them to the other options of putting dirt on the fire or using a fire extinguisher or doing the bucket, because they only see like, I got to use this hose because that's what I was told by the district, or that's what I was told to use. And like and so many teachers right now are like, oh my gosh, Schoology or Google Classroom or my video thing or whatever won't load or won't work. And if they would just step back and go, what am I trying to accomplish instructionally? What am I trying to do? Have I done this before in a different way? And a lot of times when I'm working with teachers, especially recently, the simple thing I ask them is, well, how did you do this before?
Right.
Like, how did you do this before? Will that still work? And I'm not saying that's how you're going to do it for the rest of your life. I'm not saying that that's the perfect outcome, but can it function? Can it do the job that you wanted it to do if you do it in this other way? And a lot of times they'll go, well, yeah, yes. And this comes back to a fundamental truth in that whether you're planning for a worldwide pandemic or planning in any classroom for the last 50 years, plan for the most restrictive environment and plan for the resources you have, not the ones you want, right? Like, plan with the current resources you have in the worst case scenario versus trying to will this square peg into a round hole of this perfect scenario that you can't currently do because you're having a tech issue or a problem or something's not working or you don't have access.
Yeah, and I'm going to take this one step further, because the mastermind, we really try to cater these conversations to our school leaders, our designated school leaders, our administrators. We have to remember that teachers, 99.999% of teachers are phenomenal, and they are doing absolutely everything they can to be amazing. But they're often caught in that same trap, if you will, that administrators sometimes feel like they're in the middle. Teachers are often stuck feeling like, I'm supposed to support the needs of my students, but I also have to please my boss, my evaluator, my administrator. And we as administrators oftentimes put teachers in a box by saying, this is the way that we're going to do this. Or when we're face to face, when I come into your classroom, these are the things I need to see. I need to see a learning objective on the board. I need to see bell-to-bell instruction. We put all these things in place. And we say these are the non-negotiables, which they all might be great. They might all be good, but we forget to explain the problems that we're trying to solve by those things. So then the teachers, trying to be the good stewards and the great professionals that they are, do all they can to live within the boxes and the constraints that we put them in. And we eliminate that opportunity for them to understand why those things are important and what the problems are that they're trying to solve. So as administrators, we have to, if we want to say we want to empower our teachers, we have to just give them the problems to solve and then let them solve them and come to us with solutions. So.
Yeah, and that goes back to instruction over initiatives.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you can focus on the why that objective is important is more than having something written on your board when the principal walks in.
Yep.
It's so you're aware, the students are aware, the classroom aide or intervention specialist is aware of where we're going. And there's so much research that supports that idea, just randomly, if we want to use that as an example. And it's like, I think a lot of times the focus becomes on the initiative or the software or the tool or the resource and then the argument from the leadership becomes, are you using XYZ, as opposed to, are you practicing best instructional practices? Are you doing best instructional practices? And that's a shift that I often have administrators make, because it's never about the tool or the initiative. And, I talk with grid method schools and administrators and leadership teams about this all the time. And I'm like, just as an example, because that's my reference point a lot of times, is if I walk into a classroom, it's not, are you doing the grid method or are you not doing the grid method? It's, are students able to work at their own pace? Are you monitoring their progress? Are you formatively assessing? Do you know where they're going? Can you meet their individual needs with differentiation? Because I got to be honest, and I don't know if I should say this out loud, but if all those things are happening, I don't care if the grid method's happening or not. because
the grid method is
it's
a
irrelevant.
resource to get them to that point.
Yeah,
Yes.
the grid method is a path, a bridge, a tool, a resource to get a teacher from not doing those things to doing those things.
Yes.
But if a teacher's already circumnavigated that trajectory, like, there's no need to give them a tool they don't need.
Yeah.
Now it also gives the administrator, the leader, which means you can increase expectation when the tools are provided to support the result. But you can't do it the other way around. You can't be like, I'm going to increase expectations and not give you the support or the tools that you need, as the educator. But if you do that, you can then ask the question, are these things in place? Now, if they're not in place, here's the tool you were provided. So like either do them on your own or use the tool that you were given. Now there's two options. You're giving that professional accountability as well.
Yeah. And so all that was the morning yesterday.
Yeah, that was it.
And with a group of amazing administrators and leaders from literally all walks of America and British Columbia, Ontario yesterday. Amazing. It was powerful. It was so good. And it went 1,000 other directions. I mean, that was just the surface level. And you can see we're getting worked up and fired up right now, just kind of revisiting it and taking it to that next level, because we've been thinking about it now for 24 hours, which is the power of the mastermind. It's not just, we're going to show up on Tuesdays and we're going to get a quick fix and check the box and find out the solution. And that's the secret of this. It's not about finding the tool or the solution or the answer. It's all about finding a solution, an answer, and then evolving it, making it better to fit our own context and construct. So good. So good. And then we had the evening. The evening.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I transition and pivot to that real quick?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Because, oh my gosh. Again, the cool thing about this mastermind group, or groups, I should say, is that every week and every session is so different, because they are all based off of the people that are in the space and in the room, their needs, their values, their hearts, their minds. They're the ones that drive the ship. It's not a you, a me, or a Jeff, or a Ray, or anybody else's thing. We're just there along for the ride with everybody else. And yesterday, our evening session, we had people there from Australia and California and British Columbia and Ontario and Wisconsin. I mean, all over the place. And about 60 to 70% of the people that were there yesterday in the evening group were brand new, first time people that were there, which is so cool. And they were so comfortable just jumping right in and saying, here's something I want to solve. Here's something that I want to address. And the cool thing, like I said, in the morning session, it was almost like they teed you up and said, okay, Chad, here's yours. The first question that was asked last night after we spent the 25 minutes sharing who we are and what we're about, the first question was, so I just got to ask, data. I hate it. My teachers need it. Hate it. Do we still need it? And I was like, angels were singing to me, man.
Held up your book, just mailed it to them during the live.
Well, the hardest part was me just sitting back saying, somebody else want to take this one? Because I have so much to say.
Oh, wow.
But it was good. We obviously talked about, I got up on my platform a little bit and preached a little bit about data.
I love it.
But it also
should.
But it speaks to the heart of even some of the stuff we talked about in the morning. When this person said, I hate it, my teachers hate it, that is so powerful, because I know that when we start talking about data, which is that nasty 4-letter word that we oftentimes borrow from our staff meetings and our staff lounges, nobody wants to talk about in schools anymore. When we say, I hate data as leaders and administrators, it gives our teachers permission to say, then it's not important and it's not valuable, as opposed to reframing it and talking about the data, what data really is and what it really can do for our kids. Because we've turned data into this nasty, nasty thing where it is all about numbers and test scores and quantitative labels that we slap on kids and then slap on teachers. And data becomes this thing that's done to us, not something that we use for us. Yeah. And we've turned it into something, well, we use it almost like a predictive science, which is totally misusing it as opposed to an analytical art. Sure. For example, you and I, before we went live, we were talking about how I've been obsessed with watching the Weather Channel. I've got a house down in Pensacola, Florida, that today is being hit by Hurricane Sally. And I was glued to the Weather Channel yesterday, watching the meteorologists and the forecasters use science to predict the storm's path. They were talking about barometric pressure. They were talking about wind speed, the jet stream, using all of these things to predict where the storm was going to go. And you can use science to make those predictions when you can use analytical, quantitative statistics to determine where this thing is going to go. In schools, however, we've oftentimes taken education and we've tried to use numbers, test scores, assessments to predict the trajectory of a student. Now, the big difference is with students, we can intervene and we can put things in place to change a trajectory. With a hurricane, we can't build walls and blow fans and change the direction of a storm. With a student, we can. And what we often do in schools is we take a bunch of numbers. We start getting numbers on kids now in September. We start getting a bunch of scientific data we say is going to predict the future or the destiny of a kid. And we forget about the single most important impact that we can have. Teachers and education. We are destiny changers and destiny shapers. So yeah, use the numbers, use data, quantify things if you need to figure out your next steps, not to determine the end point. And so again, I can go on and on and on about that, but we as leaders, that's what we need to do. Stop using numbers to label kids and educators and start using it to determine what do we do next.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a pivotal issue when it comes to data, in that the focus becomes so much on collecting the data and analyzing the data and labeling the data that it never circulates back to modifying the instruction based on what the data says, which is the only reason we should collect data in the first place, right? Because it's become this arbitrary thing that we have to do that's being done to us, as you so adequately put. And it's one of those things where, but if you're using up to the minute data from formative assessments in your classroom to modify your instruction and meet the needs of students and pull small groups, you're still using data, and it's not this horrible situation, you know?
And so administrators, I'm going to put this challenge out to you, especially if you're like a district level administrator who has some sort of power over what I'm about to say. If you are a building level leader, I'm going to challenge you to open up the conversation with your district leadership. So here's where I'm going to go with this. So be ready. I've been talking a lot the last couple of weeks about this concept known as moral or ethical fading. And moral and ethical fading basically is, as human beings, we justify our actions when we go against what we know is right because we were able to justify and rationalize it. And I use the example all the time. Everybody would say that lying is wrong, that you should always tell the truth. However, we can justify 1,000 different reasons, 1,000 different ways why it's okay to lie at times. And simple examples are like when you get your mortgage documents and you're supposed to read every page before you initial, we just initial away because somebody told us, yeah, it's all good, just sign away. Or the bloodborne pathogens training we as educators do every fall, where you watch all this stuff and you're supposed to watch it, but we all minimize it and put it in the background of our screen. And then afterwards we have to certify that we watched it and we're fully trained, but we justify it because our time is so important and valuable. In schools, we've done the same thing with data analysis, where we tell teachers they're supposed to be using data to drive instruction, to figure out what kids know or don't know. And then at the end of the year, teachers, we want you to bring your data to us to show us that everything was amazing and to show us that kids were off the charts in their growth in their academic proficiency. And if a kid wasn't learning, if they weren't growing, you need to cover that up somehow and come up with a different graph or a different chart to show us that things are amazing, because your evaluation as an administrator or as an educator is on the line. Your future job performance is on the line if your data, this extra thing we make you put together, isn't off the charts. So we've turned our own data construct into something we have to do as educators to prove our effectiveness and our worth, to evaluate ourselves as an extra component, as opposed to it's okay if little Johnny and Susie have data that shows they're not growing or learning, because I can do something about that. I need to be able to be transparent about it and say they're not getting it, but here's what I'm going to do next.
Yeah.
And instead, we've said, nope, at the end of the year, show me it was all perfect. And now we're stuck in this quandary of, well, I guess data doesn't really have a lot of relevance because I just have to make up a bunch of stuff that shows it was all perfect, and I can't show the reality and show where kids struggled. So,
yeah, because if you turn into that game, you're inherently building bias into the measurement system, right? You're going, that's like going to a scientist and being like, well, we want to see these results or you're going to lose your job.
Yeah.
Like you're going to get those results. And I'm not saying that teachers are messing with stuff, but like you're going to put the deck in your favor if you can, which may, if we just step back and we said data is simply a measurement of where the student's currently at so we can get them to the next step in the process.
Yeah.
If we just looked at it holistically in that way, as an educational institution, I think it would remove a lot of that. Yeah. But because and you talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think, and we talked about like the difference between formative and summative, assessment.
Yeah.
I think this kind of circles back to that a bit, right? We view this data and assessment as like the final say, as opposed to just viewing it as this is after they've been instructed once or twice, or this is after they've been instructed for fourth grade where they're currently at. And that's where I'm excited when I think about the shift towards standards based feedback and assessment and mastery grading, because it can remove some of that stigma and just focus on, listen, there's no such thing as good data or bad data. There's just the data. And it's not about good or bad. It's about, is it accurate? Is it telling us the current information? And then the most important question is, what are we doing with the data? And I absolutely agree with that. If we can focus on that part of the conversation, I think that could be really, really, really beneficial. We used to have a agreement with our school that we wouldn't analyze data during a meeting. Like the goal was, you have looked at the data and evaluated the data before the meeting happens as the educator. And when we would meet as a team or as a grade level or as a school, the discussion would be, what does your analysis show? What are the next steps? You know what I mean? Because so many meetings, and I know you've probably sat in them just as much as I have. They're just literally going, well, where was Johnny? Where was Susie? What does that look like? And 45 minutes go by, and we've literally looked at some test scores and done nothing that actually modifies or changes instruction. So nothing's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to the language that we use as leaders sets the tone for how other people move forward. And if we look at data as, again, I'll go back and say a science versus an art, or it's something that is 100% factual and predictive. When we say, what does the data say about Johnny or Susie, we're already setting it up as though it only tells us one story, as opposed to it being interpretive. It is more a language. It's an art of language transference. It's a language translation than anything else. And we as administrators need to set that tone. We need to, when we look at data and we look at numbers, we need to ask the questions, what else do you need to know? Or what do you think this suggests? Not what does it say? What does it tell you? Because it says different things to different people. Like you and I, you're in Ohio, I'm in Michigan. Here in Michigan, we call it pop. There in Ohio, everything is what, Coke or soda or whatever. I mean, the same. It's the same context, but we use different words to say it. And it's the same thing with kids in schools. We need to get to the point where we recognize that numbers or data or anything says different things to different people. And I used the example yesterday. I weigh 181 pounds. I've got a resting heart rate of 62. I run about 45 to 50 miles a week. Now on the surface, you would see those numbers and say, oh, Schmitto, he's healthy. But when I tell you I'm 42 years old, my dad had his first heart attack at 42. I never met my grandfather on my dad's side because he died from a heart attack at 42. On my mom's side, diabetes is rampant. There's depression that is all over my family. You start to look at it and say, oh, I can start to see a bigger picture. And now I have a bigger context to those numbers. And now I know more about those numbers and what I need to do next. Same thing with our kids. And same things as administrators, we need to stop telling our teachers, just go out and collect a bunch of numbers that tell you the story and say, what else do you need to know so that those numbers have greater context and informs what you need to do next? So, yeah.
So it's also, Jen Reed has some really good ideas about a course we should create. I think we should do with you. But I love the analogy. I'm going to go back to your analogy about the hurricane, tracking the hurricane. And so like what you're saying right now is resonating with me like viscerally. And I guess the way I view it is, if you looked at the Weather Channel and you said, oh, we're right in the path of the hurricane. Our house is going to be completely destroyed. It's done because it's going to get X amount of feet of water, X amount of wind. The wind's going to be 80 miles an hour. I'm going to call the construction company before the hurricane hits. Yeah. And I'm going to just schedule a whole remodel because it's going to be ridiculous.
Right.
But you never go and look at the house.
That's so good. Right.
It's like the same thing. Like you're going to drive down there or look at your video, like whatever you need to do, or have the realty company go look at like whatever. You're going to go look at the house and go, hey, you know what? a bunch of houses got destroyed, but ours was okay. We only need a fresh coat of paint and some shingles on the roof, and we're good. And I think a lot of times we just like overreact, and we're like, oh my gosh, this kid's so far behind. But no one actually goes and looks at the kid or talks to the kid or goes, hey, maybe they're, I had students who would show like a huge downswing in their data. And I'd be like, oh, well, their grandma, who's their primary caretaker, just passed away this past month.
Yeah.
So maybe there's an explanation for this data that's beyond a numerical value, right? Yeah. So I love the idea of not losing sight of that the number is not the person. You know what I mean? And that there's that humanity behind it, because that's where the art comes in my opinion, right? It's not about the ability to analyze the data. It's the ability to see the humanity behind the data and do something about it to shift the tide, to improve that data, to make the change, as you so aptly put. So, absolutely. So we're coming up here on a half an hour. I feel like we've covered a ton of stuff, and I can talk to you about data and assessments and leadership language all day. But I know we both have some busy schedules, and I want to respect that. I want to respect your time. But real quick, we've talked about how amazing this administrative mastermind is. Could you share real quick how people can get involved? And I'd also like you to share what things are in place that keep the conversation going after the chat every week, because I think that's really powerful too, and I think that's helping build this community. Yeah,
it's so good. So the Mastermind Community, first of all, at the bottom of the screen here, you can see it scrolling. This is how you get in, and it's not one of those sales gimmicks where now you're going to start getting flooded with stuff. This is truly just so you can get the Zoom code to get in. You go to teachbetter.com/mastermind, and then you will get the Zoom link so that you can get into these meetings. That's all we do on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. Eastern. We get together on a Zoom call, and there's anywhere from 10 to 30 to 40 of us that just sit around and talk for an hour. And we have these conversations, we brainstorm, we just turn over the floor to all these amazing leaders with awesome ideas. And we just sit down and take notes, and we're like a sponge. And like you said, the conversation doesn't stop on Tuesdays. What we've seen happen is we've got these amazing groups that have just flourished, and these friendships that have really flourished. We have a Voxer group that's set up for those people that love to use Voxer. Basically it's you sit around and you record voice messages for friends, and you continue the conversation. We hold each other accountable every week. We have these commitments and these things that we're going to do personally and professionally to grow, and we constantly check in with each other to see how people are going and growing. People are sharing their phone numbers, and there are these conversations that take place all week long. I already shared one of the texts that I got last night. We have people that are changing their lives personally, not just professionally, but personally as a result of this. And, I was telling you before we went live, one of the conversations that took place at our meeting last night were a person, I was in tears when the meeting got done last night, just because this person shared something on their heart with this group of people that they had just met for the first time last night. And they just felt so at home and comfortable to say they were going to make some dramatic, life-changing, life-saving decisions as a result of our meeting last night. And it fills me so much to be a part of this group, this movement, these amazing people that are growing and truly becoming family to me. And they fill me up personally. I know they're filling each other up. There are people that are collaborating on projects. There are people that are connecting daily with each other via phone and forming true friendships and partnerships and collaborative agreements so that nobody has to sit on this island and be a leader alone anymore. And it's so good. So good.
I love it. I absolutely love it, man. Well, as always, I truly appreciate your time, everything you do for this mastermind group. I try to be at as many as possible, but you've really taken this under your wing and you've made it more amazing than I think we've ever imagined it. So I just want to thank you for all you do for these leaders. And the nice thing is, I know I think we get just as much out of it as the group does. So it definitely goes both ways. It's an amazing group. And if you want to participate, like Dave said, teachbetter.com/mastermind. You can just sign up. You'll get a quick reminder. It'll give you the link, and you just kind of join in on the fun. It's really that simple. And if you want to do more, join the Voxer group. There's another support line there for throughout the week. You don't have to, but it's there if you want. Absolutely, absolutely. Jen Reed just said, if you want to make amazing friends whom you've never met, join Teach Better. So we love that. That's what we love to do on the Teach Better team. And I love that we're expanding our administrative support because let's be honest, Dave, I think right now is the time that administrators need this most. I mean, a lot of them have not had a vacation this year because they've been literally trying to figure all this out since March. And we talked about this yesterday. It's like you didn't get a vacation, a mental vacation of a lease necessarily since March of last year. Normally, like maybe July was off, then you kind of settled down, but this was a different year. So we need every aspect and support we can finally get. So thank you everyone for joining us. Have an amazing rest of your, Wednesday. Amazing rest of your Wednesday and stay awesome. Thanks a lot, Dave.